Welcome back. You are listening to another episode of the Keep the Change podcast, and we've got a very, very intelligent, bright, and special guest in the studio today as he looks around. David Verry, who is a volunteer financial mentor. David, hell of a tune there, mate. I asked you for your favourite song. We've ended up with your wedding tune.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
my wife will love that.
Yeah, she'll be very impressed. Well, we've already got the wife on side. Very, very quickly. So I'm sure we'll get the listeners on side too. Mate, I was keen to sit down today and talk to you about, firstly, what you do exactly, and then also how you got into it. But from what I understand, helping out in this space for you, this has been about giving back from your years in finance.
Correct. Yep. It's kind of a journey. And when it's saying what I do, it's actually what we do.
Okay.
There are 1,000 financial mentors
Really?
in New Zealand across 200 budget services. So we are numerous. There are a lot of us doing this. A lot of people do this as a job. It's not a well-paid job.
I'd imagine.
So there's a lot of passion in what they do. There are a lot of volunteers who also participate and are all in that situation of basically giving back, who have had good lives, good jobs, things have gone well, retired, some not retired, but in a position to say, can I make a difference to somebody else's life? And all I look at it and say, well, I did have some financial skills, so I thought, well, probably the only thing that probably would suit me is something like a budget advisor stroke financial mentor.
So some people do it and they're paid by the budget service, who then they're allocated funding, I'd imagine, by donations, government, etc. But you volunteer, you give up your time for free.
I volunteer, but I'm a volunteer with two services, North Harbour Budgeting and Auckland Central Budgeting. Now, both services have contracts with the Ministry of Social Development, so again, through the taxpayer money, budget services are provided free of charge to anybody and everybody. So everyone's eligible to front up to one of the budget services, talk to a financial mentor, and that is a funded program from our taxes.
So there's no excuse for a Kiwi to not put their hand up, apart from the fact we don't like it because it hurts our ego, and we've learned about that over the years. But there's no excuse for Kiwis not to put their hand up and say, you know what, I wouldn't mind a little bit of help in this space, and one of the team would be able to help them.
Absolutely. And for instance, there's a contact centre called Money Talks, and a lot of people will have heard of Money Talks, but essentially under FinCap, our national organisation, this contact centre, 0800 345 123, and somebody will pick up the phone, somebody will get a brief understanding of what your requirements are, and then triage you or put your name out to a budget service, hopefully in somewhere close to where you're living, so that we can try and hopefully we can do a face-to-face meeting with that. COVID put up some special challenges because we couldn't meet. But again, the technology came in, and thank goodness for Teams and Zoom and things like that, because we held many meetings.
Yeah, I bet
doing that way, or on the phone. For those that don't have the technology, we can just do a phone call, and we can still. It's a little bit more difficult, but we can still put budgets together for people. We can still work with them, advocate for them, etc. As long as we kind of have all the facts at our fingertips.
Yeah, I'd imagine that what I often say is that, and even for clients of Next Advisory, I'll say that, often making a decision to get help or to try and sort something out is just as rewarding as actually getting to the end outcome, because you finally made that choice to, okay, I'm going to iron this thing out.
We admire our clients because we realise that first step, to put your hand out and say, could I please ask for some assistance, we realise that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. We'd like people to know that, because they think, am I going to get judged? I'll go in and I've got some problems and I've got some debts. I'm I'm spending too much. I'm not earning enough. The first thing is, we're not there to judge. We are not there to judge.
Yeah.
Our roles are there to help. I even say to people, when we're talking about things, look, if you don't tell me about all the things you spend your money on, this budget is a fiction. Okay? I said, I don't care that you take drugs. Well, I do care that you take drugs, but I'm not there to to be saying, well, make
Don't
a
do
judgment
that.
on you. I just said, for the purposes of your budget, I just need to know. Because unless I know what you're spending your money on, I can't start to even assist you to hopefully make some better choices,
Yeah.
potentially. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the choices our clients make. They can ask us, well, what do you think? I said, well, I can let you know what I think, but at the end of the day, this is your choice.
Yeah.
It's your choice. I'm not going to direct you to do anything. It is your choice. Now, sometimes your choices, if you decide to go down a certain route, well, there's only going to be one outcome.
Yeah.
Go down another route, there might be a couple of possible outcomes. So, again, that's where we're saying I'm not there to absolutely direct you to do something.
How many people would have some form of, it's hard, I guess, maybe non-PC of the way I'm about to ask this, but basically some form of issue, and it could be a substance issue or alcohol, drugs, etc., that does play a role in, the amount that's going out of the bank account as well.
Yeah, look, that has been something where people say, that it's bound to be something like that. I'd have to say for the majority of our clients, it's not. If you want to call the drug is probably debt.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about
debt,
a drug,
yeah.
it's debt, rather than
So it's
a substance
consumerism.
abuse or cigarettes or gambling. Now, I do. I have client had a classic case. I had a lady that I was working with late last year, early this year, gambling issues. We'd got everything back on track. We had all the debts. We were getting everything repaid. Everything was looking good. Weekly cash flows that we were doing and then got an email. My car was stolen last night. And she says, and I know that you'd said to me that, gosh, just make sure you've got insurance on that car because it's financed. Of course, I hadn't arranged the insurance. And then she signed off. And I hadn't heard from her, and it was only early this week. 2 months later, finally made contact again to saying, would you? I know you probably don't want to, but would you take me back? And of course I'll take you back. I mean, I've been sending you emails and texts for the last 2 months to say, please call me. So that was somebody with a gambling issue. I've got another lady, and I've had several ladies where they smoke $150, $180 a week on cigarettes. Now they make choices between cigarettes or food.
Gotcha.
And they're quite happy they quite happily to make that decision. I'd rather smoke than eat. But no, generally the majority of our clients, I'd say the big issue is lack of income and debt.
And debt spiraled out of control. Is there a feeling of hopelessness for a lot of these people? Or
for a lot, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Some people live with it. Some people have lived for years and years and years with debt, and I don't know how they do it, but they manage to get by. Then they get to a point where actually it's overwhelmed me. It's overwhelmed me. I've had debts that have gone off to debt collection. The phone's ringing. It's an 0800 number. That'll be a debt collector. I'm behind on certain payments. I've started to get behind on rent. I've started to get behind on, I'm not even able to put good food on the table. That's the point at which a lot will come to us.
Yeah.
We'd like them to come a lot earlier, but we realise for a lot of people it's the emergency when that hits that they finally do come. Those that come earlier, you find your options are you have more options as to how you can help.
Yeah.
Look, we're seeing that at the moment with mortgage clients. Historically, budget services didn't have many people with mortgages talking to them. Now, that's in the years because for the last, 10, 12 years, interest rates have been, just tracking down, hitting the twos. Everyone's loving it. Gosh, how big a mortgage can we have when it's got a 2 in front of it? And now we're getting people saying I'm about to look at a reset on my mortgage, and it's going to have at least a 6 in front of it.
Scary.
It's going to have a 6 in front of it. So we've now started to see people being proactive and coming and knocking on the door and saying, hey, what what are the implications here? I mean, it's quite easy to do the implications, but even today I just went into Sorted and said, gosh, what did I end up with? I said, we'll put a $500,000 mortgage in there, 25 years, 2.5% weekly. You'd be paying $517 a week for that. When you reset that in a couple of months at six, if you're lucky, if it's 6.5, it'll be at $778. So that's going to be another $261 a week. Every week on your mortgage. You bump that up to $750,000 mortgage, and you're looking at an extra $392 a week.
Sheesh.
And that's a big chunk of
after-tax income, eh?
After-tax, correct. After-tax income, cash, and you're saying, okay, have you got that as extra cash? Do you now need to start pruning back now on what your spending is?
Yeah.
Can you bring in some extra? I mean, the first thing we always start with, when we get somebody in with a budget, and we finally get the budget there, and we income, take off expenses. Look, hopefully we're balancing and maybe a little surplus. More often than not, no, we've got a deficit. We're spending more than we earn. Okay, well, first things, okay, can we increase income? That's, let's before we start slashing expenses, is there some way we can increase income? Is it a part-time job over and above what you're doing? Are you, for a person who's a beneficiary, are you getting all the benefits that you might be eligible for? Need to ask that question. So how can we boost the income before we have to start looking at what do we have to do to reduce expenses?
Yeah.
But then it's, okay, well, we're getting the maximum income. Okay, and if we're still looking at a negative figure on the budget, remembering that a budget includes a whole lot, we call them, the yearly, annual expenses. We do someone's budget. We put in things, you've got kids and family. Yep. Okay. Well, you're going to have birthday, Christmas presents, realistically.
True.
What else are we going to have? You're going to have school costs, and there's going to be a school camp somewhere in there that we're going to have to look at. Anything that might be regarded as a genuine thing you're going to spend your money on. What's your medical going to be this year? Don't know, but we're going to have to put something in to cover it. A lot of people don't think about when they own a car, and you're thinking, oh, you're going to have to put something in for maintenance on the car, set of car tyres, things like that. So we try and cover off all possibilities in a budget. Now, all I can ever say to people when I finish their budget is saying, I've got more chance of winning lotto than this budget being spot on.
Yeah.
Because we've had to make all sorts of assumptions and guesstimates for a lot of the yearly expenses that we don't know whether we're going to be spending on it or not. And then there's and we don't know anything about unexpecteds. We can't build in every scenario. We'd be going into doomsday if we built in COVID or floods into every budget we ever did. People
they lose the will to live.
Yes,
they'll be looking
like
at a deficit forever. Going, what's the point?
That's right. So we can't cover everything off, but we've got to try and do all the reasonable things. But that's the same thing if we're assisting people with the KiwiSaver hardships, things like that. All these are realistic expenses to go in. So again, even putting in birthday, Christmas presents, those sorts of things that go and say, yeah, they're acceptable. They're expenses that people will incur.
How do people qualify for KiwiSaver hardship typically?
Okay, well, typically they will be there because their budget, based on reasonable expenses, is in a deficit. Now, the reasonable expenses will also include your debt commitments. So if you've got a car loan, you've got a mortgage, you've got credit card debts, you've got buy now, pay later, all of those debts, they all go into the budget. They're all part of it. So they're not expenses you can, I'm just not going to pay that. No. So they are realistic expenses and also if you're in arrears. So the classic thing is if we assist someone with a KiwiSaver hardship, we're typically looking for, we come up with a deficit. Most of the KiwiSaver schemes the supervisors will approve 13 weeks of deficits. They do it basically in quarter-year chunks, and will cover arrears. So if you've got debt arrears or rent arrears, those sorts of things, those will typically be covered by a KiwiSaver hardship withdrawal.
I see. But you've got to apply for that, don't you?
You do. You have to go through all the KiwiSaver providers. They all have supervisors. It's quite interesting. I often sort of jokingly say, and particularly with the bank schemes, it's often more difficult to get your own money out of a KiwiSaver scheme than it is to actually borrow money from the bank, and it's actually your money you're getting out. Now there are quite strict rules around getting KiwiSaver out.
David, everyone that's listening knows exactly what you're trying to say. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, it is, and it's saying, oh gosh, and it's that time that they ask for a really in-depth, look at the expenses, and you're going, if these people were in trouble because of it might have been from a loan that you've been involved in, or a series of loans, one of which is a bank loan, and you didn't ask this number of questions when that was approved.
Yeah.
So
yeah, is part of it just that it's been so easy to get credit for, like, you've been in the game for a long time now? Do you think it's just been so easy to get credit across all these different platforms for maybe this last decade or even longer, that we've just gotten used to just taking on this debt and sort of, well, we'll just see what happens, or is this just normal?
I think we just have got used to that sort of thing. I recall a number of years ago having some South African clients, and they got to New Zealand and they said, we couldn't believe how easy it was to borrow money.
Yeah.
And it was a case of, I can see that because you're sitting in front of me and you've got 2 car loans, you've got 4 personal loans, you've got 3 credit cards, you've got all sorts of other things. Yes, it was very easy for you to get credit here relative to other countries. I think most countries the credit has probably been very easy to get, particularly we've done the easing and the money's been flowing into the systems. Our biggest thing is just making sure it's affordable, and that's where the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act comes in, is that we are passionate about affordability being basically the centerpiece of any lending that's done. There's that whoever does that lending has to make sure, as best they can, with the right inquiries, that they should be lending that money to those individuals or those families. And unfortunately, we see an awful lot where there's very, very little work going into establishing affordability. Someone can walk into a car yard in South Auckland, and it may not be, your listeners may not be, in that sort of situation, but people who can't get credit anywhere will go into a South Auckland car yard, and within 2 hours, they'll have walked out with probably it could be a $30,000 to $40,000 car.
Shit. And
then the fun and games starts for us, because then it's suddenly, I've missed my rent, I've missed payments, I've done this, I've done that. The money should never have been lent in the first place. And it all starts with finance companies that have car yard representatives as their agents. And unfortunately, they don't always tell the truth about situations.
So some of these car yards, for instance, they've got people working on the lot that are effectively finance people who they can figure out whether they'll be able to give the credit out or not.
They are employees of the car yard.
Oh, they might just be on site kind of thing. Oh,
well, they're employees, and they're saying, here's a lovely car. Look, and I'm sure we can work the finance out for you. We'll assist you with the application. They actually write the application.
Yeah.
Get some information. They might try and get some bank statements through. But typically we find that, or in many cases, the information is just rubbish. The person will be sitting there with, they'll be there with a husband and wife and 3 children, and on the application that goes through to the finance company, no dependents.
Oh, really?
You're going, pardon? No, no dependent. But there were 3 children. They said, well, we were there with our 3 children, while we were signing the documents, and the documents, came off their printer, and did they explain those documents to you? No. Oh, but that's meant to happen. Well, they didn't do anything. They just told us to initial these pages here that, we'd had everything explained to them, and away we go. Typical one, we were talking about this before, and one of the things they had to pay for, one of the things they paid for was the installation of an immobiliser. And then they pay a monthly rental on an immobiliser. So if they don't pay their make their payment on their car loan. They should, in theory, get a warning.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't happen. And then they will get a very severe warning, we're going to turn your car off, so they decide, right, well, I'm not paying my rent today. I'm going to pay the finance company for keeping my car going rather than food on the table or my rent.
Because it's interesting, like, I'm a massive advocate of, personal responsibility and trying to figure your stuff out and stuff. And that's all good and well when you kind of, you sort some of your things out and you can start doing that right. But I guess the danger for, someone who is not as lucky, let's say, as someone like myself, where they might have their car immobilised, but then that leads to the kids not going to school, for instance, and then the kids are then truant from school, and then they might be getting into things that they shouldn't be doing, and then we create problems over there, right? So I think sometimes it might be easy for, even myself and some of the listeners to think, well, fuck, they should know better when they're signing up for a car like that with an immobiliser, but at the same time...
Well, they tend to be, they're also desperate.
Yeah.
They're also desperate, and they go in and somebody makes out that they're their friend.
Oh, I see.
Look, we can
help
you out. We can help you out. Don't worry. Look, I know your credit's not great, but we'll do whatever we can to help you to do this. And of course, that comes down, as I said, they walk out with a $40,000 car. Now, the car's not worth $40,000.
No.
The car would be probably, if they had the cash and it was on Trade Me, it might be 20.
Wow.
At best.
Yeah.
20,000. They also end up with a whole bunch of add-ons. We call them add-ons, and it's the immobiliser, which they have to pay to have installed. So they end up with these insurance products, most of which are totally useless. Both the Commerce Commission and Christians Against Poverty have both done very, very good papers on add-on insurance for motor vehicles, and they're just useless. But again, classic example, could be up to $6,000 of extras.
Yeah. On
top of, I had a client had $30,000 car. When we looked on Trade Me, it was 17. Then he had $6,000 of extras, which is insurance products which they pay for up front. So that's part of the financing. $36,000. Over the course of the 3 years, he pays back $54,000 if he takes the contract all the way through. So $17,000 car over the course of 3 years will cost him $54,000, and that's just a standard example. That's just standard.
And it's good because I think a lot of people would be thinking, oh, well, I'm not in this position. I'm not going to car yards. I'm not falling for this stuff. But I see this all the time with business owners as well. They'll buy a car and they'll say to me, oh, I brought this car for my business, and they'll send over the docs. First thing I'll say, just out of interest, is, oh, what interest rate did you pay? Because I'm just trying to keep an eye on interest rates. And they're like, oh, not sure, mate. I'd have to check. And I'm like, what do you mean? But then we'll go to account for it, and it's like, oh, yeah, the car did cost $39,995. But then again, there's these add-ons, and they might be 1,000 plus, but they don't care because they're like, oh, all I want to know is what's the monthly amount going out or the fortnightly amount, and that's the figure that they look at, and they don't realise that these add-ons up front, they've paid for up front, they've been financed, and they're now paying them back over the 5 years that they've taken the debt out over, and they just want to know, well, what's the cost of this vehicle month to month? So I think there's something for all of us to learn here.
Absolutely.
Where these same tactics are probably being used on all of us, no matter what level of financial literacy or cash we have when we go on to buy some of these things.
Absolutely. I mean, the classic thing also is things like phones, and young people with phones. They're not currently. I don't believe they're actually regulated in any way. So you go in and you get the latest iPhone, and you get it on and of course you get it on a 2-year plan.
Yeah.
With a great plan, and you're going the number of. But I was going to say number of young people. It's not just young people. Anybody that's saying they just want a really good phone. You're saying, yeah, but do you realise how much you're paying for this over the course of the couple of years that you're doing this? And it's costing you $120 a month for this, and particularly you might be a university student or not even on a great pay. And do you realise how much is this? I mean, an interesting thing is, years ago we used to say, budgeters used to say, or financial mentors, oh, mobile phones. No, you don't. No, just a phone. You're saying, no. Now a mobile phone is a necessity. For safety, for any number of things, a mobile phone, and most or a lot of people don't have a landline, and we haven't had a landline for a decade.
Yeah.
It's all done by mobile phone. You're saying but it's pretty essential that everyone has a phone. Now, you don't need the latest iPhone or whichever it is. A cheap functional phone works on a $36 a month plan. It can still take photo, it can still do a whole bunch of stuff, text that. You don't need the latest and greatest and then get stitched into a big plan that goes with it. But again, we just see so many people that then saying, "Oh God, how long before you get the phone paid off?" And it's just yet another little extra that goes in, another temptation.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that by the time you're putting a budget together with someone, they probably don't even know when they're going to pay it off by, right? They'd have to check back to their Spark bill or whatever.
Well, you can find it on the if you do look at the second page of the bill.
Yeah,
you'll see it. It'll say you've got so many payments to make on the. You got another 14 months of payments to make on the on the bill. So we look at that and go, you've still got 14 months on this.
Key those into the budget.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, I'll take you back to say someone presents themselves to use that lingo to you because they've rung money talks, for instance, and they've been told, right, you're going to meet with David on this day, and they sit down with you. Is that step one? I'd imagine first there's probably a why are you here, that sort of thing. Sounds like when I go to counselling, mate, but it's
well, and we are, and I think I mentioned we're part of what we do is counselling.
Yeah,
bluntly, I mean, and it is sort of it does sound a bit unusual, but we know that with the majority of the clients sit down with us, first thing is they're under stress. They're there. Some people are there. I just want to see that everything's on track, and that's all very nice. But no, the vast majority of clients that front to financial mentors are under stress, and it's a stress. They're saying, "I've finally got to that point. I need some assistance," and good on them for actually saying, "Gosh, I can't get through this on my own." And we totally praise them for doing that and doing it earlier rather than later. So. Yeah, part of the first thing is before we get into there's a few forms to fill in. They say, just tell me your situation. Let's just see where we are. Hey, what do you do for a job? Where do you live? Hey, what's happening? And then tell me why. How can I help?
Yeah, nice.
How can I help? Because I'm thinking you're here because you might be looking for it. So hey, that's what I'm here to do. So let's hear from you.
Do people, I was just thinking, they might then be reminded of the time they were on the parking lot thinking, geez, this guy seems just as helpful as old mate down at the parking lot. Do any of them, do people have trust issues and stuff like that? Where they
I'm not there to take any money off them.
True.
In fact, I've got to say, people tell us things that they won't tell their partners.
Mm.
I've got clients who I've worked with for a number of years now. Their partners know their. In fact, one day we always jokingly say, "You're the other man in my life."
Yeah.
To her husband, there's the other guy in your life, and she tells me things because of the debts that she had. Her partner wasn't aware of the extent of the debts that she was in, and was too, and not fearful in terms of, but just embarrassed to talk to her partner and say, "Look, here's the position I've got myself into," and. In that sort of counselling, you're saying there's going to be a point. Look, there has to be a point where, because you're in this partnership, it'll be good for you to that we all get around the table and we discuss where you're at. But for the moment, some people will tell us things that they couldn't possibly tell their partner, and it may have been just about bad decisions that they've made, things like that. And again, that's where we're non-judgmental. We're saying, I'm not here to judge you, and so what can we do? And then how can we get to that point so you can open up and look at it? Because when we're dealing with get some people coming and say, "Oh, I want a budget done." Saying, "Okay," and you get good. Okay, and so you're on your own. "Oh no, I've got my partner or my husband or wife, that sort of thing." "Oh, okay. Now this needs to be a household budget. It's not just your budget, because you're in a living in this situation. Unless you split all your expenses right down the middle, and unless you take care of your debts and the other person takes care of theirs, we're actually in a household. We need to look at this holistically. So we need to know. So actually, and more often than not, it's probably we'll start off with the female in a relationship. All sorts of different relationship, but typically it'll be in a marriage, the female will come in first, and then.
Is that because, just to interject, that they make a lot of the financial decisions in a household? Like statistically, isn't that correct? That
I think it's more the fact is that they're probably more prepared to put their hand up early.
Okay.
It comes down. I'm sorry. It comes down to the staunch. I don't need any help.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. I think that's what it
Part
comes
of it
down to.
too.
They're more likely to say, I think we need help. Well, I definitely need help. I know we need help, but I need to start with that. And then we'll just call it the male. It is a male female thing. That does happen. It can happen the other way around as well, but. Typically, it's if you're in that, it's a case of let's start with you, but actually we need to get this whole thing together and actually to have everybody in the room so we understand where we're trying to move, where we're trying to go to, if we can.
You need to get everyone on the same page, right, to like buy into the vision of getting there.
Yeah, because if someone's saying I don't think there's a problem,
stuff,
and you're going well, and typically the problem is, and unfortunately we see it. The worst cases we see. Where whether it be male or female, where there's been people together, someone in the partnership or in the relationship won't have great credit. So the person who's got the good credit has all the debts sitting under their name in a relationship sort of sense, and then the relationship splits up, and off goes the partner that's not really had the great credit, but none of the new debts are in their name, and there was one person left holding all the holding all the debts.
Yeah, I've had an email about this from someone in the exact same position. I think it's a good reminder for people that you've got to be very careful in your relationships with the debt that you're taking on behalf of other people, right? As much as you might be thinking you're doing the right thing, you're left with it at the end of the day, aren't you?
Well, absolutely. It's in your name. It's not unless it's in both names. It's
your debt.
It's your debt, and particularly where there's a car involved, and your partner's got the car and they're no longer there and you're still paying for it.
Sheesh.
Then that's not unusual.
Wow.
That's not unusual. So again, people have to be very, very careful in those sorts of things. As you'd find in the business sense when you've got somebody, can you get your parents to go guarantor of a debt? And hold it now. Just let's make sure everyone's getting independent advice on those sorts of situations. Yeah. It's pretty fraught.
It's all good and well at the time until things go,
pear-shaped.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden.
That's another thing. And again, it's even when you're, we have now with people assisting their kids, people who are in a position to assist their kids into first homes and things like that. I think the majority of people, in fact, I'm not sure it's the majority, if you're saying, well, if we're going to be putting money in from one side and it's not equal from the other, then we're going to put it in as a debt, not a, we're not going to just make it as that's a family gift and the whole thing, because if this relationship doesn't last, the other party who brought nothing to the table will be eligible for 50% of it, including the gift of whatever was there. One horrible situation, sort of a little bit of a tangent here, but relationship property things are just an absolute mess, and I've got particularly female clients who are spending vast amounts of money in the family court. I think the family court's a bit of a rort.
Yeah.
And I actually at the moment, just because of a couple of cases I'm involved in where the females are just having to expend huge amounts of money. I've got one who is basically exhausting her KiwiSaver under hardship to get funds to be able to fight for herself in family court. She's also being economically abused by her own lawyers, but that's another matter. I think I look at it, years and years ago we used to have, before ACC, we had it was, if you had an accident or something, you got hurt, the lawyers used to make, I think, and one of your listeners will probably correct me, but I think it was about 25 to 30% of law firms, their money all came from personal injury cases, and then in came ACC, and there was a whole thing going on. I'd love to see that happen for the family, family court, family law situations, because I just see and I have to say, and particularly females, just being economically abused by the whole process, and just the costs of having to go through family court, $50, $70, $100,000.
Wow.
I had this situation with my client that her own lawyers sent a letter saying, "Oh well, unless you provide us with a retainer," which I said KiwiSaver won't provide retainers. We've got to the point where they'll pay out on the invoices, but they're not going to give a retainer. But they say, "Oh, unless we get a retainer, we're not going to represent you." Oh, and by the way, need to point out to you that the money that you're taking out under hardship from KiwiSaver is, of course, relationship property, and of course your former partner is eligible for 50% of that. And I was thinking, who are you working for?
Yeah.
I was appalled. I was
Wow.
I was. My wife, the air was blue. My wife said, "Would you mind keep it? Would you keep the voice down with the swearing?" I just felt. I felt my client being abused not only by her her former husband, but by her own lawyers.
Advisors, yeah.
I was just appalled.
Yeah.
I was just appalled.
And I'm
convinced that do we make a complaint to the Law Society? I've got this letter which that's got things emboldened in red that we will fail to represent. I said, if that's not abuse, that's shouting.
Yeah.
That's shouting at your own client.
Oh, it sounds like, mate, you might have to find a spare bit of time to try and fight that battle as well by the sound. Yeah. And so I suppose at the moment things are getting busier and busier for you, right? So people are coming in, you're helping them put a budget together, and that would probably look week to week for a lot of people.
Correct. Yep. Weekly cash flows.
And then do they come back for a bit of accountability as such? Because I'd imagine all good and well to set a budget, but then, like you said, it's probably not going to be 100% accurate, but you've got to ensure that they follow it, right?
Well, the majority of clients are not, call it set and forget clients. The majority of clients we see now have multiple issues. So it's not just one meeting.
Yeah.
We'll have multiple meetings, phone conversations, whether it's Zoom, Teams, face-to-face, the whole thing. Most of the situations are complex, and particularly where we're trying to advocate for our clients, there's a lot of work going into that. So, and that might be across multiple lenders. We may have lenders where we're challenging whether the loan should ever have been done. Those are very long, complex situations. So these things, and then it's a case of, so what's the most important thing we can do? So with somebody that came into me last week, it was, okay, so what's the most important thing? Right, there's 10 issues, but the number one issue is, the power company's going to turn your power off today unless you make a payment. Right, okay. So that's the number one issue today.
Yeah.
This other one over here that something's gone off to the debt collector, okay, that's number 10 on the list. We're not going to be dealing with that today. We're dealing today with the power company. We need to make sure that the power stays on. What are we going to do? How do we make the call? Do we make the call to the power company and say, right, I'm sitting with the client. We're trying to do things. Can you give us some time? We're going to make a part payment. I say, have you got any money at all? Yeah, well, I can spare $50. Okay, $50. Boom, stick that into the power account. Part payment, better than no payment. So if you're sitting at the, we know that from talking to the, to any of the utility providers, a part payment is better than no payment.
Yeah.
Or if someone's in difficulty and saying, I'm just not going to be able to make that payment, ring the creditor and tell them that. Ring them and tell them. The worst thing, the thing they hate the most is not hearing anything. Oh, no payment, didn't hear anything. Someone calls and says, look, I've got a real problem. Da-da-da-da-da, can I do it? Oh, okay, look, first thing, hey, thanks for calling. Tick.
Yeah.
Tick. Hey, you called. Thank you. You communicated. Thank you. That's the first thing is communication. So if anybody is having any issues, one, don't ignore them, but secondly, communicate. And secondly, communicate if you're having a difficult time. You need to let that creditor know you are having a difficult time because they have to have protocols in place. For people who are running into genuine hardship, every lender has to have protocols in place. That's required by law. So, and whether it be hardship provisions, whether it be, hey, we need to be able to work with our clients, they all need to be able to do something. But it often does start with the client saying, hey, I need, as I say, they come to us, I need some help.
Yeah.
Or I'm having a problem. So I say to people, please do not ignore your creditors and actually just be honest with them. the majority of creditors, not all, but the majority will say, hey, appreciate you calling us, letting us know. As I say, we know there are some predator lenders out there who really don't care.
Yeah.
But I would have to say that, I'd like to think the majority of creditors will give people some space, particularly if they're working with a financial mentor.
Yeah.
Hey, they've also made that step. So not only have they called them, they've also said, oh, by the way, I've also engaged with a financial mentor or a budget service. So they're going, oh, tick, oh, 2 ticks, right, great. So they've got someone sitting alongside them who's used to dealing with this sort of situation. So, hey, all right, well, right, you've got some space. You've got some space to deal with it. It's not forever, but we know at least someone's helping you work on is there a way through this. So that's quite important. Say to people, the 0800 number comes up. Is it a debt collector? Look, I'm sort of debt collectors. Sort of think I'm sort of the agent, so I get a lot of call from debt collectors.
Yeah.
And on behalf of a client, and I must admit sometimes I'll be doing something and I see the 0800 number come and say, I'm not picking that up. I'm not picking it up. And then they'll typically email me something that's there. So I think it's really that important.
They'll keep trying.
They'll keep trying. They'll get me, and we'll address it. But for the moment, sometimes I have to say that I've ignored the 0800s.
Yeah. We're all guilty. Do you think that people that may not necessarily be this far in trouble in terms of levels in debt and stuff, so they might just be, as I say, typical Kiwi credit card, buy now, pay later, might have a student loan as well. Do you reckon, even something with the bank, for instance, do we underestimate our ability to go back to some of those lenders and say, hey, look, I want to try and sort this debt out. What can we do? Can we work together? Can you, I don't even have that car anymore, but there's still $2,000 on the car loan to pay. Can I settle it with $1,000? Does that happen?
That can happen. Yeah, we do find, particularly with debt collection agencies, we can typically negotiate something.
So that's where it's gone.
It's gone from the first creditor, and they've handed it over to a Bay Corp, a Credit Corp, somebody like that. It's gone past the collection departments of the creditor themselves. In those situations, in fact, they will often send again, because I'm often on the email, it comes to me rather than the client, and they say, the $7,000 debt. We'll settle it for $5,000. You're going, well, that's great, but we don't have $5,000 to settle it. But there are situations where we will negotiate back, and I've got one client at the moment where, in fact, he was a former. I started working with him in prison, and he's out and just working brilliantly now. But he had a whole series of things that, when he was in prison, went off to debt collectors. So we are in a position now of just basically going through with each one and saying, hey, negotiating that $7,000, will you accept $3,000? No, we won't accept that. We'll be saying, oh, will you? Then you get sort of a bit of as with any negotiations, a bit of backwards and forwards as to what we do. Some, of course, the worst outcome for clients, but sometimes it's the one we have to go for, is insolvency. And it's when all else has failed, and I mean everything else has failed, and we just don't have options. He said, well, actually, for some clients, there is relief in just getting finality. We're looking at someone, you're saying, in your lifetime, you are not going to be able to pay off these debts. They're hounding you, they're doing this, they're doing that. We'll call it the only option we have left is an insolvency. And even going through an insolvency, no, it's not pleasant. Obviously, credit record goes to zero, go through the insolvency. But it does give you finality. It gives you a fresh start. Again, I worked in Parry and have done, and haven't been in for 3 years because of COVID, but I used to work with a number of inmates there, and their biggest thing was they've got debts. You're saying, well, are you going to be in a position when you come out of prison to repay any debts. Hopefully you'd be able to get a job, but
Yeah.
to suddenly then have a whole lot of debt. So, I used to do probably 50% of the clients I had in prison, we put through insolvency while they were there.
Sure, because I didn't even really think about that. So you go to prison, your debts are still due, right? So people, the debt's like, hey, the
Correct.
creditor's like, hey, pay the debt. And you're like, well, can't,
Yeah.
mate, I'm not even...
Well, one of the worst features, not worst features, child support. And a lot of guys go in and they're paying child support. Now, there's a particular form that's meant to be, that if you fill in, it's called the IR 597, which if prison fills in and sends to IRD and says, look, person's in prison, they've got no ability to
contribute
or make any payments. So can you suspend, the child support? Well, sometimes that's not done, and they come out and say, I've still been incurring child support debts, and child support doesn't get written off.
Sheesh.
There's only fines and child support are the two things that in any insolvency don't get written off.
So you might come out of prison and end up with a stack of child support debt which you haven't yet paid, but you're still obligated to pay it. But surely you'd be able to go back and say, hey, this form should have been done. No?
Doesn't work retrospectively.
Really?
No. Doesn't work.
So
work.
They might even go, okay, I'll trigger insolvency, I'll do that, and still just going to sit there as a debt.
Correct. The
Wow.
only thing we can get reversed is they often have penalties and interest.
Yeah.
And I had one guy I was working with. His child support debt was $228,000, of which $48,000 was actually the child support, and the rest, because he had been in for quite some time, was interest and penalties. Now, we managed to get all the interest and penalties.
Yeah.
Well, we got it from 228 down to 48.
Sheesh. They add up bloody quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, they wouldn't. But even then, they wouldn't. We tried to negotiate since then to get can we not get 48 down? And some of this was incurred back in 2009.
Sheesh.
No.
Well, I'd hope that none of the listeners, mate, need to know anything
No,
about
sorry,
going to prison.
that's right.
So I might take us back
We'll
to
take
people.
us back, yeah.
I'd take us back to people that might have a mortgage that are obviously presenting themselves now. And
Yeah.
you're saying, okay, this is a bit strange, didn't used to happen.
Correct.
So what sort of advice are you giving them?
Talk to your bank early. Try and find out what are your options. First thing is make sure if you've come in, you've done about what are you going to be able to meet. We went through the figures before. Are you going to be able to meet this additional cost? Because it's going to be a cost. You're not going to be able to avoid that. Start your discussions with the banks. The banks will have geared up their departments in preparation for this, I'm pretty sure.
You're 100% right, because I've got a mate who works in one of them, and he's told me, like, over the last couple of years, he's been helping build out a team to get ready for this.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
really surprised. I was like, oh, wow, it's quite a long process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So they'll be we'll call it geared up and ready for it. But when I say geared up and ready, their options tend to be fairly limited. If you think about it, they can do, okay, can I go interest only? Yeah. Okay, yeah, we can do interest. And used to be banks would sort of do interest only for a period of time, but then, no, we've got to get back onto the, principal and principal repayments as well. Then during COVID, we had either they called it the mortgage holiday, and I hate that term. They're saying there was no holiday.
Yeah.
Interest was still accruing. You weren't making any payments, okay? Yeah. But interest was still accruing, and the minute that stopped, the interest got added onto the principal. I sort of tongue-in-cheek say that in that period of time when the banks were, obviously you weren't writing a lot of new business when we were all locked down with COVID, the mortgage books were still probably growing because they were just adding the interest. Was the extra principal was going on basically from the capitalisation of the interest. So. Yeah. You had a bit of growth in your mortgage book through capitalising interest, So, and I've been open about saying, look, if you have a client with a mortgage, it's probably a 25, 30-year relationship. It could be a 50-year relationship. In times where your clients have run into some real issues, is there not a point at which you can say, look, for a couple of years in our 30-year relationship, can we, I don't know, just break even on what we do? I'm not saying to take a loss or anything like that, but can we just break even? maybe we can put out a nice, I'm not saying a preferential, we can put out a rate which, if, okay, we're at 6.5 or 7, okay, we can do you a 5. We're not going to make our net interest margin. We're not going to make our margin, but we're going to cover our cost of funds, just as a bit of relief. In a 30-year relationship, couldn't you consider just doing that?
Geez, that's wishful thinking, David.
I like to think sometimes I can be, optimistic about people thinking about it. Maybe the banks are thinking of things like. I'd like to think that they were trying to be innovative, because I don't regard interest only and then capitalising interest as being particularly innovative. Yeah, the old holiday sort of thing. I do.
It's more of an extension than a holiday.
Well, basically, and that's the other. I guess the third one, of course, is take the term back out.
Yeah,
I turn it for it's 20. You've been 10 years. Okay, we'll put it back out to 30 years, and okay, that'll reduce it. So sorry, there was that third leg that I failed to mention.
Do you think we'll see more of that if things really get tight for a lot of Kiwi families? Those will be the solutions again?
I think they'll be the solutions, but the people who are probably struggling the most are the ones that bought in the last couple of years. It's the first home buyers who will be, I would have thought, and again, if your listeners that are still in banking could correct me, but I would suspect that the ones have taken on their big commitment. They took out a whole bunch of their KiwiSaver, which is another issue, because when they get to 65, they ain't going to be as much KiwiSaver as when you started. It's in the house, it's just fine. But a lot of them will be looking at, gosh, we took out, we got 20%, that was our deposit, and guess what? Our home is now valued at, well, gosh, only 80% of what it was when we bought it. So our equity's gone. Well, sorry, on paper.
Yeah.
On paper, our equity's gone, plus our costs have gone up. So, and extending the loan, okay, well, 28 years, okay, we'll just put it back to 30. Well, 2 years isn't going to make an awful lot of difference on putting the term out.
Yeah.
Because we've only been in it for 18 months, 2 years, so that's not really, unless you do a 50-year mortgage, which base it on a 50-year, but I doubt that's going to happen.
I think it's a good reminder for all of us that, when things are going well, to really, use that to your advantage, or be wise with it, right? So what I mean is, you might naturally will change our lifestyle based on what access to disposable income we have, right? Instead of going, interest rates are quite low, I might chip off a little bit more of my mortgage than I need to, just to give me a bit of breathing space. And I'd imagine there's going to be quite a few people that go through this next sort of 5 years or however long rates stay like this and think, sheesh, I wish I didn't buy heaps of the shit that I didn't really need that's now sitting in the garage, and instead paid down my mortgage just a little bit more to give us that breathing space, because the paying down a mortgage, the compounding of that over time is such a huge benefit, right?
2020 hindsight's a great thing.
Yeah.
I wish I had it.
Yeah, don't we all?
And people say, people will often come and say, so what are interest rates going to do? And I say, look, if I knew what they were going to do, I would be a very, very wealthy person.
Yeah, you'd probably be working for the Reserve Bank with not volunteering to help people. Sitting next to Adrian Orr at the Reserve Bank there. So is there anything else that you're seeing at the moment in terms of people coming in or presenting themselves, or is it just a lot more of the same?
Well, I guess it's compounding, and again, the other sort of hot topic we've got is buy now, pay later, which again it's still a relatively new phenomenon. I guess it's probably 3 or 4 years, and we used to call it lay-by.
Yeah.
But you didn't get the goods until you'd actually paid for them, and if you didn't want them, you just said, "I'll stop it and got your money back." But buy now, pay later has been in the last few years has been the single biggest contributor to, we think, people getting themselves into financial difficulties. But it's so easy to get. We talk about easy credit, but buy now, pay later has been very, very, very easy credit to get into with no checks. Well, they say they've got checks and balances, but they haven't. Now, obviously, the legislation's changing. It's all been announced that buy now, pay later is going to be brought into the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act. It hasn't yet, and it's out for consultation. The consultation is more about, they're saying, they think they wanted to introduce the suggestion has been a $600 threshold. And so we're saying, well, number one, is this $600 threshold, is that per buy now, pay later provider, or is that $600 in total? Our view is, and we are, because who we are, financial mentors, we say, no, there shouldn't be a threshold. It's zero. So if it's buy now, pay later, whether it's $600, whether it's $60, a lot of people can get into a lot of difficulties with credit of $600. And some of your listeners are going, oh God, that's nothing. We say, but huge portion of the population here, and particularly a lot of young people, and particularly young females, do love buy now, pay later as a means. I'm not opposed to buy now, pay later across the board. It has a place. It has a place as long as people can afford it, and as long as the providers have assessed whether the people they're giving that credit to can afford it. But they don't. They might do a quick credit check. We want an affordability assessment done. In other words, you have to do some work to decide that, yes, your client is going to be able to make the repayments on the buy now, pay later. It's over a short period of time, but over a short period of time, those are things that they may miss other payments, other obligations they've got to make. You know, we see people missing rent payments and missing figures. Oh, God, I've got so many buy now, pay later things on here. So those assessments should still be done. The other problem we have with the suggested threshold is that now the Financial Services Federation is saying, oh, well, if buy now, pay later can have a $600 threshold, well, so should every other finance company have a $600 threshold. Nobody should have to. If they don't have to, we shouldn't. If we give somebody a $600,000 line of credit on a personal loan or something, no, we shouldn't have to do all the affordability assessments that we're currently supposed to do.
Yeah.
So you're saying, well,
so they're asking for their own types of thresholds in different.
There is no buy now, pay later. The recommendation that came out from MB was that we'll introduce buy now, pay later, but suggestion has been that they'd worked out that the kind of the average buy now, pay later balance across things was about $600, and they said, okay, so if we say that it's up to $600, it's okay. But above that,
no test